大家好，歡迎大家收睇《即係長談》呢個節目，我哋嘅節目主持人姚永安。今日好高興咧，我喺節目度咧請嚟另一位香港人。咁呢個香港人咧就比較特別啲嘅，同我哋係唔一樣嘅，起碼喺個外觀上邊啦。咁佢咧就係呢個列治文嘅Queensborough 嘅省議員，咁亦都係呢個卑詩省嘅環境事務嘅省務廳長，佢就係 Aman Singh。Aman 你好。
thank you。
嗱，好多朋友都會奇怪就係點解我叫你做香港人咧嚇？其實就以我所知，你1歲咧就係屋企移民咗，由印度移民咗去香港嘅。
係
嚇
，almost 1 year old。
咁當時點解你屋企人會移民去香港嘅咧？
我屋企人嘅economic situation was not the greatest in India, so like many immigrants from all over the world, like how we come here, 佢哋去香港to make their economic situation better。
因為其實我都記得咧，即係喺香港，即係後來就當然有好多菲律賓人啊，又或者係有啲泰國人啊，就嚟做一啲 caretaker 㗎啦，幫人打理屋企㗎啦。咁但係我印象中好早其實香港已經有印度人嘅社區㗎啦。其實當時其實你喺香港係咪都已經有好多印度人喺度住嘅咧？
係 there's lots of 好多印度人啦。印度人嘅 community 係in the 1970s 1980s probably 25,000-30,000 people。同埋印度人有一個Gurdwara the temple。
係有 temple。
And but small community, compared to the rest of Hong Kong, because what was the population of Hong Kong in the 70s, 80s was 7-8 million. Small community, but very visible. Just like the Filipino community, just like the other community.
好啦，咁嗱，你1歲就搬到香港啦，咁喺香港長大啦。咁就其實喺香港嘅時候，你即係譬如話，除咗讀書之外咧，有啲咩娛樂㗎？會唔會又睇下 TVB 嘅電視啊？又或者係聽下啲廣東歌嘅咧？
Yeah, of course. 我哋睇下 TVB 電視。I think what was it called? 英國 TVB 係 TVB Pearl。
OK，TVB Pearl 英文嘅嚇。
TVB Pearl 同埋RTHK。I remember waiting until 4 or 5 o'clock because you remember in the 1980s, English TV didn't start until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So canto pop. Didn't listen to so much canto pop. Mostly Thai 電視。
咁你後來喺加拿大啦，有冇啲香港嘅嘢你係特別係懷念或者記得嘅咧？好或者唔好嘅？
Yeah, I loved living in Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong was a great place to live. Hong Kong was a great place to grow up. Vancouver, Richmond is also incredible. So, also Richmond is very similar to Hong Kong. This is one of the reasons we moved to Richmond from Hong Kong, is because of the similarity, maybe not in terms of the temperature and climate, but in terms of the culture and people. So, great places to live, both of them.
嗱，咁我作為一個香港人喺香港係主流啦，咁就我成日都覺得咧，香港人咧就有啲歧視性嘅即係睇法嘅，尤其是當時譬如話對啲菲律賓人啊或者對印度人咁叫你哋做阿叉啦嚇，咁其實你點樣？你嘅感受係點？同埋你人哋叫你做阿叉，你會唔會感到受到冒犯嘅咧？
Yeah, discrimination exists all over the world. And we have that here in Vancouver as well. And it's sad to say it exists all over the world. It also exists in India as well. And especially a lot of lateral discrimination. Especially because of the colonial history of Hong Kong and of India. There's a lot of lateral discrimination that exists everywhere. That existed everywhere. But I'm proud to say that Hong Kong was, for me growing up, Hong Kong was an incredibly safe, wonderful place to grow up. I still have really fond memories of Hong Kong. The people of Hong Kong. I grew up Machito, I started in Wan Chai. We grew up in Wan Chai. Great experiences in Wan Chai with people. And so, yeah, discrimination definitely exists everywhere in the world. But I think it's important to recognize that wherever you go, most people are just people, and they want to live their lives, and most people are really good, and they're really good with each other, and they're really good with neighbors. And I found that in Hong Kong. Hong Kong people were incredible.
嗱，其實就我哋雖然離開咗香港啦，但係對於香港都仍然係有留意嘅，尤其是香港近年發生嘅嘢，自2019年之後咧，咁啊最新香港政府仲係立咗呢個23條嘅國安法啦。其實你有冇留意香港嘅情況，同埋你會唔會感覺得有啲悲哀嘅咧
？You know my background. I was a social activist most of my life. Started my activism in Hong Kong actually at a very young age. In environmental activism, looking at migratory birds because Hong Kong is a very special place.
Maipo.
Yes, Maipo. That's right. And so my activism started and I moved into being a human and civil rights activist and human and civil rights lawyer. So of course I monitor the situation, and I see what's happening in Hong Kong, and I see what's happening all over the world. And I look at that situation always with concern, and I still have family and friends back in Hong Kong, so it affects me personally. But really, as a provincial politician and as someone who represents Richmond, Queensborough, my real interests and my real focus lies here in Richmond, Queensborough, in serving the people of Richmond, Queensborough, making sure that we have a healthcare system that is improving. We have an affordability crisis right now, and trying to tackle that. Our housing, we have a housing crisis. We've been trying to tackle it for the last few years. We're making indentations in that, and so really focusing on what's local. I definitely am very concerned about international issues, especially Hong Kong, and I will continue to monitor that situation.
嗱，咁啊，你就係列治文區嘅省議員啦。咁就其實你個區裏邊咧就有好多華人啦，亦都有好多華人嘅商業喺度做噶啦。咁你作為省議員佢哋嘅代表啦，咁你平時對佢哋嘅接觸啊，或者係見到佢哋嘅時候咧，當佢哋知道你有呢個香港人嘅背景嘅時候，佢哋嘅反應係點樣嘅咧
？Language is really the key to so many things, right? Even though Mogatongwa係as I said to you earlier, Mogatongwa係好好，係Mogatongwa係細佬個通話。
細佬哥嘅廣東話。
細佬個通話。So because I left so long ago, my vocabulary isn't great, but I can understand mostly, and I can speak. So I think that is a great connection for me with the Chinese community, especially the community from Hong Kong. Is I'm able to connect with them by speaking in Cantonese with them, speaking in Tonga with them. In addition, we have, I grew up in Hong Kong, so I have, I played in Victoria Park. I went to, I lived in Wan Chai, Tung Lo Wan, in Haumate. I saw the horse races. I went to the Peak. I was there. I gave out lycees during New Year. I was there for the Lantern Festival. So I have that cultural, I'm familiar with that cultural understanding, and that really helps because I'm aware, and I still celebrate almost all of the events, almost all of our holidays from Hong Kong, as we do here. So I think that really helps. That helps connect me to especially the people from Hong Kong.
嗱，咁你講話你認識香港人啦，你亦都知道華人嘅啲價值啦。咁我好想問下你啦，近期咧亦都有一個非常之大嘅新聞啦，就係列治文嘅市議會咧，就係有個動議就話研究係咪開設呢個注射屋啦，咁就引起好大嘅反應啦，就係講緊呢個濫藥或者用一個毒品呢個名詞嘅話題啦。咁我亦都睇到好多華人咧，包括一啲近期香港嚟嘅人咧，就好激烈嘅或者反應好大嘅。咁其實即係對你嚟講咧，究竟係發生咗啲乜嘢事，同埋仲有就係 BC 省嗰個政府嘅立場係乜嘢咧
？Yeah, to preface everything, one, we are in terms of that specific issue itself, I think Vancouver Coastal Health was very clear that they have other priorities for Richmond, and that they were not in the process of looking to open a standalone site in Richmond. So it was almost a non-issue in that way. But I want to preface that with the fact that we are in a what's been declared a health crisis, where people are dying, and our government's view is that we are here, and we're committed to helping people, because these are people's daughters, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, who are suffering, right? And we recognize as a government, we recognize that addiction is a mental disease. It's a mental health thing, and not a moral or ethical failure. So as a government, we're committed to doing whatever we can to try and prevent deaths, to try and help people with a medical issue. And we're committed to keep on doing that. And in fact, all parties in the legislature agreed to go forward with this. So that sort of prefaces it. But in the specific situation that we saw here in Richmond, it's almost a non-issue, because again, Vancouver Coastal Health was very clear that there are no plans for a standalone site here in Richmond, that they have priorities. They only have so many resources, and they need to put those resources in other places where where they get greater results for the amount of money and resources that they put in. But this is a really complicated issue, and I understand that. This is a really complicated issue because people are afraid. People are afraid that it affects their families. People are afraid that it might affect their children. And I completely understand where that fear comes from. And it's really unfortunate that there are forces out there that are taking advantage of that fear and fear-mongering and increasing the stigma. Because, again, as I said, this is not an isolated issue. It affects every family, and these are not. I think one of the issues is, maybe you can help me here. The word for drug, tukpan, yes, is the same as the word for poison, right? And I think
but
that
in English, it's only drugs.
In English, it's only drugs, yeah. And so, in many ways, I would replace that with medicine, right? With the word medicine, because that
narcotics actually is medicine.
Narcotics actually is medicine, okay. And so that, that really is a better perspective and way to look at it. But I completely understand the fear of the unknown. That is very, very normal. And I think, we as a government, it's our responsibility to do a better job of educating people on exactly what we're doing, what we're not doing. And we understand that, and we have a much, much bigger job to do in terms of educating people. But again, it doesn't help when there are people out there that are fear-mongering and that are spreading fear and essentially hate against people who are in really, really bad shape, right? And again, these are not isolated people. These are people who are someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's brother. My history. I am a recovered alcoholic myself, right? And many people struggle with alcohol. It's and I've been sober for many, many years, and I understand that stigma. It was a stigma because even in my community, even the South Asian community, there is that stigma of what are people going to think? What are people going to think? What are they going to say to my parents? And so I hid it from myself and from other people for a long time, and I wasn't able to get help. It wasn't until I got over that stigma and reached out for help that I was able to get it, that I was able to recover. And I'll be 14 years sober this year. And people may say that think that it's a failing, but I don't think so. I think it has made me stronger and made me more compassionate and empathetic, and I think that's what our society needs more of, is compassion and empathy. But I do understand people's fear. But it's my plea to people to look towards that compassion, and don't let the forces of fear and division divide us. We're all in this together.
頭先你所講，我覺得有幾點係真係好重要嘅，例如講緊話呢一個係精神健康嘅問題。 而唔係一個道德嘅問題。因為好多人就會覺得就呢個係道德嘅問題，你食毒品就係唔道德㗎啦。咁我道德即係我唔食我就道德高過你。呢個其實係一個即係衞生或者精神嘅議題嚟嘅。咁另一樣嘢其實亦都可以提醒大家咧，就係話我哋啱啱度過咗一個咁嚴重嘅疫情啦。咁疫情裏邊係的而且確死咗好多人。咁亦都政府為咗係去防止減少人受到傷害或者減少死亡咧，係用好重嘅一啲政策嘅，包括係將成個經濟係關閉嘅，啲人係冇得返工唔使做嘢嘅嚇。咁同埋亦都要用好多錢啦。咁個事實就係咧，就呢個所謂 drug overdose 咧，即係呢個濫藥嘅問題咧，所死嘅人咧係比起呢個 COVID-19 係更加多嘅。咁所以即係亦都因為咁樣，就係政府係做好多呢方面嘅事情啦。咁但係我亦都好想問一個問題啦。嗱，你又了解唐人啦，你本身嚟自南亞裔嘅社區啦。咁以我所知，其實南亞裔嘅社區好似對呢個議題咧，就好似冇唐人咁大反應嘅。咁你可唔可以同我哋講下，即係你哋個社區，譬如南亞裔嘅社區，對呢個濫藥或者係 drug overdose 嘅議題咧，係點樣睇嘅咧
So it is, of course, we're talking generalizations, right? And that fear and anxiety that exists among all communities is there, right? Because it is for 100 years, drugs have been looked at with a lot of stigma. So that still exists. But I think what we have is there have been I think there are not the same forces trying to divide. There are there, but their voice hasn't been as strong as it has here in Richmond, which is unfortunate. And I think that really is the main reason that the forces that have been trying to divide and trying to increase the stigma have not been able to capture the imagination for whatever reason of the larger South Asian community, and so it's not seen as much as much of an issue. I think we really are dealing with forces that are just that know what they're doing, that are dividing, that are trying to divide. And as you said rightly, we have the federal conservatives now who've done a complete flip, right? Because they're taking their cue from our friends across the border. And they're using that politics of division. Instead of bringing people together, they're using that politics of division, and I think you'll see more of that. I really think that is one of the main reasons. I think that is probably the pinpointed reason, is that the forces of division have not been able to infiltrate the South Asian community as they have here in Richmond, unfortunately. But we're going to combat that, and you're absolutely right. This is COVID-19 was an emergency on an unprecedented scale, and the government showed up. And this has been an emergency on an unprecedented scale, and we have a whole ministry that's separate and dedicated to dealing with mental health and addictions and to try and make people better. Unfortunately, the effects of COVID-19 were not just on the disease itself, but forcing people out into isolation really had a detrimental effect on the mental health of British Columbians, and that's not just limited to the issue of narcotics, but just in general, in terms of depression, suicide, all these things. The isolation that COVID-19 caused really had a detrimental effect on mental health, and we're seeing that now.
嗱，有啲即係新嚟嘅人啦，或者嚟咗好耐嘅人啦，好多華人啦，就會覺得就話其實咧毒品就好容易處理嘅啫，你只要將嗰啲癮君子咧就係拉咗佢，或者逼佢戒毒或者擁佢個荒島度咁就戒完毒之後先翻得嚟嘅。好啦，咁佢翻到嚟之後咪戒完毒咯，戒完毒咪解決個問題咯，咁咪唔使咁多問題咯。咁你覺得呢個係咪可以解決到問題個方法咧？
It's much more complicated. If it had been that easy, then the Reaganite era of just say no to drugs and put people in jail would have eradicated the situation and the issue of addiction and mental health a long time ago. We've seen over the decades that doing that putting people in jail or forcing people into treatment just does not work, because it's a much more complicated issue than that, right? It has to deal with people's traumas, has to deal with their mental health, something that's very, very close to them. On top of that, you have the societal stigma, so people don't go and get help. I would mental health and addiction especially, is very much like diabetes in many ways. It's very much like the disease of diabetes. It's a disease that you have to manage. Diabetes you manage by pumping insulin.
It's also medicine.
It's also medicine, yeah. And so mental health, especially drug addiction, is very similar as well. You have to manage that. First, you have to keep the person alive, right? Which is why we have all the programs that we have, is really to try and keep people alive. Once a person is alive and they're in a place, you can offer them treatment. And that treatment is just like the insulin. They have to keep on going through treatment, they have to keep on going through counseling over time, and to manage their disease, to manage their mental health until they're at the point where they are better. I'll take myself as an example. Right. I recovered from alcoholism using what's called the 12-step method, Alcoholics Anonymous, in meetings. I still go to meetings because it's part of my management. To me, my meetings, where I sit and I talk with other people about this, is like me taking insulin. So it really is about managing your disease. And it's not so simple. If it were so simple, we would have solved it a long time ago. We know from Asia that drug addiction has been here a long time.
In Hong Kong, in China, even they have a much stricter penalty than
Hong
Canada.
Kong, I remember way back in the 80s watching a documentary called Chasing the Dragon, which was made in Kowloon, in the Forbidden City in Hong Kong, about heroin addicts, and it's been around for a long time. So that we know that doesn't work. We know what doesn't work. We're hoping this works. But the first thing is to keep people alive, and it may not affect you now. But we're part of a society together, and that's what's so great about British Columbia and about Richmond, about people here, is that people really see, and that's what's so different from having grown up in Hong Kong, where we didn't in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have any civic. We weren't citizens in many ways because we had no civic responsibilities, we had no civic obligations. Here you have those, right? And so you're able to participate civically, you're able to participate and make change. You're able to become a city councillor, an MLA, an MP, and make those changes. So I think everything affects everybody. And the great thing about British Columbia and Canada and Richmond is that everything affects everybody, and that we are able to be the agents of that change, that we're able to get involved in politics, we're able to get involved in healthcare, we're able to get involved in these things and be there at the center of that change.
其實你講得好啱嘅，你講緊話即係聯邦保守黨而家就大力反對呢個毒品啦，其實或者濫藥嘅事情啦。但係其實如果大家記得咧，上一次選舉咧，當然係另一個黨領啦。咁當時佢嘅選舉亦都好清楚講明咧，係要醫療嘅方法嚟處理呢個濫藥嘅問題嘅。咁但係而家新嘅黨領咁啊，用咗另一個唔同嘅方法啦。咁你就話佢喺美國偷師翻嚟咁，但係其實美國嘅即係濫藥問題亦都唔見得比我哋好咯。咁你拉晒人坐監，亦都唔係可以解決到個問題咯。不過我亦都要問你一個問題咧，呢個亦都係近期一個熱門嘅話題嘅，呢個亦都同你即係呢個作為省務廳長有關嘅工作，就係究竟點解我哋要收碳稅？同埋有啲人話就話其實對於一般或者大多數嘅 BC 省民咧。佢哋其實收到嘅錢咧係多過俾出去嘅碳稅嘅，你可唔可以同我哋解答下呢兩個問題咧
？So, we had COVID, and then right after COVID, we had a summer of heat, wildfires, and then we had the atmospheric river. We saw that, like the rain that came and destroyed, Highway 1, destroyed so many farms in Abbotsford. We saw last year again unprecedented wildfires. The weather has been crazy. So climate change people have been talking about climate change. Like I said, I started off in Hong Kong as an environmental activist, you know, looking at bird sanctuaries.
It's much worse than those years.
It's you know, and we were talking about climate change then. It's not coming, it's here. Climate change is here. We're seeing the effects of it, you know, unprecedented, you know, drought and rains and flooding in California. 2-3 years ago, we saw the crazy fires in Australia, and then the flooding that happened. Climate change is real, and climate change is here, and we know that it's man-made, right? And so we have to do something about it. And the carbon tax, a tax that the opposition brought in many years ago, and that, you know, the opposition,
BC Liberal government.
BC Liberal government brought in many years ago, and the opposition leader was, you know, he calls it one of his proudest moments. It was a good thing. What it does is it taxes industry, essentially, on pollution. It's an environmental tax, right? So what that does is it forces everybody to be more environmentally conscious, right? And especially industry. And we've seen that. You know, we have in British Columbia, under our Minister of Environment, my boss, we have a Clean BC program, which has won awards around the world as one of the most comprehensive environmental programs, and the carbon tax is really a key part of that. And so if we want to deal with climate change, there has to be a cost to pollution. There has to be a cost to pollution, because if we don't, there is a cost to the economy, right? And there is a cost. Think about the billions of dollars that it cost us because of the atmospheric river, or the wildfires, or with diminishing ecosystems. There is a cost to that as well, and that cost will be borne by our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. We want to make, you know, we want to leave this world a better place than when we came into it. So the carbon tax is really a strong part of that. And you're absolutely right. For most British Columbians, for the average British Columbian, you know, the tax is aimed really at polluters, and it's really aimed at making industry more green, making sure that they take the measures that they need to reduce their carbon output, because the less carbon output that they do, the less tax they'll have to pay. That's right. So so for an average person like me and you, with the carbon tax credit, we get at least what we pay out in our gas bill or in our grocery bill and everything. We get more back at the end of it. So it doesn't, you know, it doesn't affect the affordability for regular Canadians, regular British Columbians, yet it places a premium on pollution and makes the polluters pay.
即係所以好多市民收到政府嘅 rebate check 就係呢個 carbon tax 嘅稅嚟嘅。
Exactly, yeah. And you will get more, for most British Columbians, they'll get more back than they actually pay. And you know, how do you pay for the carbon tax? Like me and you, because we don't, you know, we're not in industry. We pay for it in our gas bill. We pay for it in when we fill up our car. We pay for it in our groceries. So it's all, you know, because any tax that a industry has to pay is usually passed down to you. So whatever our portion of carbon tax that me and you pay, we'll get more back, at least that much back.
OK， 咁啊，同你又好好傾，但係時間就到呢度啦。咁啊，呢個禮拜咧就即係長談咧就講到呢度。下個禮拜咧另一個話題咧會同大家繼續討論嘅。拜拜。